need to breathe. And I've got to get away. I can't deal with this, 'cause it makes me miss my soul. Maybe if I confess, I can lay it to rest. Maybe I'll go.
How do you cope each day? What helps you get through each day?
Well, I think there are a number of things. I think physically there are methodologies you use as breathing techniques. But on the other side of that is mostly be distracted. Be distracted by things you like. I'm kind of a history buff, so anything, especially World War II, I enjoy that. Pretty much anything History Channel. For the most part, I like to be distracted. I have two daughters, one in college and one in high school who's about to graduate, and they certainly distract me enough. Well, I have it's kind of new in the field. It's cumulative PTSD. There might not be any significant event, although there may be that I can't mentally recognize, but it's over the period of my my law enforcement career, just a series of events that I was a witness to, a part of, that led to my diagnosis.
If you could describe PTSD from your experience, how would you say it?
I think it's your inability to deal in regular, normal situations without the sort of aura of negative events that you've experienced in your life. Sort of, you see things through the lens of somebody that's been involved in arresting terrorists, or seeing people with nefarious motives, watching the World Trade Center come down, things like that.
Have you ever exploded in anger at work, family, friends, anywhere?
Good question. My personality isn't really apt to explode. However, when brought to a certain point, my PTSD has had consequences. Whereas I actually had an aneurysm in my brain which ruptured. Now, PTS certainly wasn't the main cause, but the fact that I had PTS certainly contributed to that. So I really have to monitor what I do. I get seizures quite often when I get upset. So have I gotten angry at times? Absolutely. Whether it's from my personal situations, divorce, or things that have happened in the workplace, flying on a flight on a mission, we call it. So.
Do you have insomnia or any kind of sleep issues? And is it always the same kind of dream, or is it different?
It really is. I've been having the darkest, most negative dreams. Matter of fact, I'm not exactly remember the term, but I'm actually, in my dreams, I'm actually cognizant of that I'm dreaming, and sometimes I'm able to control my dreams. But a lot of my dreams end up in me getting shot, or me shooting somebody else and them shooting back, or blown up, or car accidents, which I've seen the results of, kids hitting trees after a DWI, and it's the most horrific thing you could imagine. So yeah, sleep is definitely an issue. I do take medication for it though, so that's helpful.
Do you have flashbacks, and does that incident ever repeat?
Yes, flashbacks is something that happens quite often. Mostly of the event, the one event that's seared in my mind is the first tower of the World Trade Center falling. What had happened was on September 11th, I was a supervisor at Terminal 1, JFK. Out of the tarmac there, we have a clear shot of the World Trade Center. As the crow flies, it's all but 12 miles away. So I got out there with a couple of my inspectors, and we were just watching the building burn, and watching the building burn just brought images in my mind of people who had to choose between dying from a fire or jumping out of the building. Because to me, the fire was such that there was no way anybody could survive, and they had to have known it. So my image of that keeps coming back, and then subsequently the collapse of the World Trade Center. Each floor, as the building came down, if you remember how the building came down, it was designed to come down that way, but just like boom, boom, floor, floor. And as each floor came down, I just imagined the people that were in there and just had no way to escape. You know, that really weighs on me. I often think of that, and in a way, I don't know if it's such a bad thing, because I think it's important to remember, just so we can go forward, be proactive. As a nation, I'm going to do my part to make sure that doesn't happen again. And in a way, I tried to do that when I became a federal air marshal. That's what motivated me to become a federal air marshal, watching that building come down. I was one of the first to get my application in the mail, and they called me, it seemed like 2 days later. I didn't even know mail got to Oklahoma that quick. My qualifications were such that they were looking, I was a firearms instructor, which they were looking for people who obviously could shoot, because in an environment like an airplane, you don't want anybody to miss. So, and I had a lot of law enforcement experience at that point, 11 or 12 years. So I was the perfect demographic for the job. Getting back to the original question, yeah, flashbacks are mostly about that tower coming down. And I tried to keep that in mind when I was flying these, 10, 11-hour missions into Europe, to Turkey, just sitting in, you're sitting in first class, you try not to get too comfortable, and you certainly can't fall asleep, so you try to keep the mission in mind.
Do you ever get emotionally numb? Not that you stop caring, it's just that you don't feel anything.
Absolutely. I get numb in situations that for most people would either get completely stressed out, panic. In some ways, it's instinctual, in so much that in order to get a job done, you have to be numb. Now, connecting that to the PTSD part, now that I'm not on the job anymore, I see situations just in regular life where if I see a car accident on the road, I pull over, and sometimes there's fatalities and stuff like that. Whereas, again, you have to be numb to, help people out, to get the job done. But there is a certain unhealthy side of being numb. You don't want to keep your feelings, kemped up inside, because they can manifest themselves in really deleterious ways later on. So that's pretty much where I stand in terms of numbness.
All right, can you give us an example of your hypervigilance?
Well, I would break that down into, my connection to PTSD and hypervigilance, let's leave that aside for right now. As a federal air marshal on an airplane, hypervigilance is the name of the game. It can be really, it gets really repetitive, boring. You could, fly millions of miles and see nothing, and then all of a sudden it's game time, and which is exactly the way 9/11 happened. Yes, hypervigilance was the name of the game as an air marshal, and I trained people. I was also a trainer on hypervigilance, how to stay hypervigilant, because sometimes it can get tough when you're out there 35,000 feet. Now, in terms of PTSD, I could be traveling on the road and just get a little over hypervigilant, just checking out, who's next to me, who's behind me. Some people might say that borders on paranoia. In some ways it's positive, but in other ways it can be negative, especially when you have young daughters that are driving and you're constantly worried about them, to the point where you're just always worried about what could be happening now they're driving, And I suppose most parents are like that, but in the case of somebody with PTS like myself, I think it exacerbates the situation.
Are you easily startled? Loud noises, somebody slapping you on the back or tapping you on the shoulder unexpectedly?
You would think from my background that I should answer a definitive no to that. However, I am easily startled, and that absolutely, I think, is connected to my PTS. However, when I am startled, I kind of go into air marshal mode, almost like I take my step back, I'm getting ready to go for my weapon. It's almost, people actually laugh sometimes when they see my reaction, like I'm almost like a comical, like, ugh. And it's, yeah, I would say fairly. I mean, obviously loud noises, I was a firearms instructor too, so I was at the range constantly. Yeah, I did become immune to a certain extent to those noises, but now that I don't hear them every day, I hear, fireworks or something going off, I'm ready to go.
Your first thought?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm just ready to go. I'm thinking gunshots.
Do you have negative thoughts? And about what?
Yeah, I mean, as opposed to, every person has negative thoughts, but my negative thoughts kind of are geared towards the state of the country, the future of the country. I fear that the current generation really doesn't appreciate the history of this country and how we got to where we are and how we can stay to where we are, as if being the greatest country in the world is something negative. That really scares me. The fact is, to be the greatest country in the world, we have the ability to help other people, other countries, and the fact that we have a constitution, we have a Bill of Rights. The whole premise of this country was the rights of people, no matter who you are. We've had some bad things happen in our history, some things that we did wrong. We're not perfect, but I fear that the generation that we have now isn't going to get it at some point, and that scares me.
Do you ever feel hopeless or guilty, and does this affect your daily life?
Oh, hopeless and guilty is, that's my daily routine. Is hope. And I wouldn't say hopeless so much. In some ways, I'm more hopeful than hopeless. As far as the guilty part, yeah, I am so guilty about everything I've done, on the job. I should say everything. I think back to when I was working in immigration and I was supervisor. We had a Dominican woman who we detained, and we had discovered she was working here, and she had a tourist visa. We decided that to send her back to the Dominican Republic. I think she waived her right to a hearing at that point. There were other things we could have done. The long story short, we put her on the plane that crashed in the Rockaways. So now here's this woman whose only crime was working here, and now I sent her to her death, basically. I know that sounds harsh, but it's kind of what it was. I was a supervisor. I had the ability to stop that, and I think a lot about that woman. It never ends.
Have you ever engaged in any self-destructive behavior, and can you give me an example of, how you may have gambled on the future?
Yeah, that's a sensitive one for me because I've done a lot of things that certainly shouldn't have done that could have gotten me in a lot of trouble. Certainly, there were times where I drank a lot more than I should have. That, certainly had negative consequences, especially, when you get behind the wheel. Not that I want to say I drank and drive to the point where I wasn't able to do it, but there were some really iffy moments, and it was really a perfect storm in my life at one point where you have the air marshal, the pressures of the job, and I was going through a really bad divorce. And everything kind of converged at once, and yeah, my behavior was definitely completely self-destructive, and I had a lot of relationships end because of that too, and people saw that I was self-destructive, and unfortunately a lot of people run away from self-destructive. They don't, a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to help you, and unfortunately that isn't the case. In most cases, people say they're going to help you, but they walk away at the first sign of any kind of trouble. It's just unfortunate.
Now, how do your symptoms, such as they are, affect those people around you? Family, friends, co-workers, even the public?
Luckily for me, now that I'm retired, I have the ability to run away when my symptoms are getting, active. I think certainly when I was working, when I was on airplanes and going through what I was going through, I mean, there were times when I actually, I broke out into a sweat, and I just, for no apparent reason, and people would be looking at me like, and the flight attendants especially, because the flight attendants knew that I was air marshal there to protect, so, they kind of questioned my ability to protect them, I would imagine it sometimes when they saw me. Although, again, at game time, I knew I was always going to be ready, but there were times, I can remember specifically, I think it was Christmas, it was not Christmas, it was Thanksgiving, and this is when I was going through my bad divorce, and my ex-wife had told me that the kids didn't even want to see me, and I'll never talk to them again. And so I was getting on a plane knowing that, and I was kind of a mess that whole flight. Generally speaking, now just day-to-day activities. My good friends know when I'm having my moments. So luckily, I surround myself with good people and good, loyal friends. So I'm lucky that way.
So to follow that up, you have a good, strong support system that helps you.
I do, and I discovered a whole new group of friends post divorce and post law enforcement career. Friends do change sometimes. It's the loyal ones. I still have some friends that I have from first and second grade, so that's good too. And the other thing is, people you're friends with who are gone through the same thing you have. Nobody's gone through quite what I have, but in terms of the divorce, that kind of thing, that's a helpful support group right there. So,
what do you personally think will help solve the most issues around PTSD, yours or anyone's?
Well, I think that now that it's becoming more of an issue on the front burner as opposed to being on the back burner. I mean, like anything else, the first step is recognizing that it's an actual thing. I think it certainly can be treated in a lot of traditional ways, and there are, I believe, untraditional ways that it can be treated, in so much as doing, like I run 3.5 miles every couple of days. And some of my runs are runs and sprints out of anger. So that's kind of self-treatment. To surround yourself with people in your same demographic group as much as possible. Being in a relationship helps, from what I remember, although I'm not currently in a relationship. Although it could be a hindrance also, depending on the person. There are people who are in relationships, the other person reinforces negative thoughts when you have PTSD, if they don't understand what PTSD is. And I know I keep going back from PTSD to PTS. The reason why I try to leave off the D is we don't want to think of it as so much as a disorder. We want to think of it as something that, you might not have been necessarily born with it. It's just something that happened over the course of witnessing events. In other words, the same Marine that saw combat never joined the Marines, was, a stockbroker or something. Well, that same guy might not ever have PTSD because he wasn't in the Marines. He didn't see what he saw. That's why I don't want to say it's a disorder. A disorder is something we want to say more as, first of all, it's negative connotations to begin with, but is more geared towards something you're born with. And I just think it's something based on what you've seen. It's based on what you've witnessed.
You believe exercise is a good thing for PTSD, PTS. You believe support system is a good thing for PTS. Would you recommend anything else?
I think I think we need to gather our resources together and do a media blitz. Something like what's happened with the opiate addiction crisis. That has become, a front burner issue, and as it should be. Once it becomes awareness happens through actions in Congress, having our congressional people involved, that kind of thing. Social Security disability, in order to get it, PTS, the disability, you have to prove that there was an event and name the event and what the event was. And as I said earlier, there is a cumulative PTSD where it could be a series of events that led you to have the PTS. So I think that needs to change too. Again, I think public awareness is the most thing. Social media has played an enormous role. Social media, people don't realize what an impact social media, especially Facebook, has had on life. People just live on social media, which a lot of people think is a bad thing. I don't think any kind of information, I think, is a good thing. So flow of information. You go to some countries, I was in Turkey, they banned Facebook when I was there. You couldn't go on Facebook.
What is the intensity of your symptoms? What's the biggest, most difficult thing for you to deal with?
I think, I don't want to bail out on the question. I just think, generally speaking, every day from the moment you wake up till the moment I won't even say the moment you put your head on the pillow, because PTS really affects your dream, your subconscious as well. I just think there's an aura always. Everything you do is seen through the World Trade Center coming down, that lady that I put on the flight that ended up crashing. Everything I do, and that's why I try to live life, try to treat people with respect. And I almost feel like I have to make up for what the whole world has done wrong and what I did wrong. Like as if something was wrong, like something I did was wrong, or something my country has done wrong.
But too, that's how things are colored. That's how you see. The lens of PTS is always over your eyes, morning, noon, and night, in your dreams. And then, would you say, as a result, you feel driven, in effect, to help people, to help understanding, to help others?
I think more than anybody, it's like almost like, I don't want to say it's a game, but I put myself in the other person's shoes, whoever I'm talking to, the person behind the counter at 7-Eleven. Oh, I wonder I always want to feel like, what is he feeling like? How can I make his life better? Or if it's somebody that's not nice, well, how can I give it to that person then? I'll give it right back to them. I always try to put myself in the other person's place, empathy, because I think it helps me function as a person, and I really think that's how you get to people, convince people of things based on how you connect with them, what they're feeling, what they're seeing, and I do that with everybody I interact with, even when you might have a problem with a camera or battery. I want to think of what you're feeling, so I want to distract you. Say, I want to check my phone. I don't want you to feel bad that something went wrong with your camera. So that's pretty much it.
I can't sleep at night, and I have horrible dreams, and all these things inside rip me apart at the seams. And I can't help but think that this will never end. When will I feel my heart 'cause I need to breathe. Just for one day, and I need to breathe. And I've got to get away. I can't.
No man is left behind.